Are you experiencing back pain that you can't get rid of? Getting migraines, vertigo, having trouble sleeping, and/or brain fog? Do you feel like your medical doctor doesn't understand your condition? Blair Chiropractic might be the solution you've been looking for. If you've ever been skeptical about this, the two doctors you're about to listen to were even more skeptical than you were when they looked into chiropractic work. But fear not. Get expert guidance from the blonde and the bald, Doctors Beth Bagley and Frederick Schurger. These two doctors have extensive experience beyond the healthcare realm and bringing unique vision and healing to their patients. What do you have when you get a biological analyst and an engineer together? Find out right here on another episode of The Blonde and the Bald. Welcome your hosts, Doctors Bagley and Schurger.
Well, Dr. Bagley, how are you doing this week?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing excellent. It has been a wonderful week. Had several new patients that have come in from another doc that since retired and unfortunately passed away, Dr. Mathias's office.
Yeah.
And then a couple that haven't been in since January of his that didn't even know that he passed. It's very sad.
Oh, that's always heartbreaking.
It is. But they're all grateful that I'm able to take care of them now. And had a couple of other patients who haven't been. I had one patient in tonight. She hasn't been in since 2018. Got a new picture on her, and I think she's going to do great. So
love it. I love it. Yeah, we had some really outstanding results this week, and one lady, 18 years of chronic pain following a couple car accidents, and never thought that. Honestly, she said to me today she didn't think that she wanted to live like this anymore, and it's been literally 2 weeks of care.
Wow.
And she says, I have a new lease on life. And it just makes it a good day to be a chiropractor.
It does. It really does. In fact, I have another, I've got an ex-Marine who's been having these ups and downs since we started care. And he's like, this is different. Normally I have to slouch just to be comfortable. And now I can stand up straight and tall. He and I will probably sit down and do a one-on-one interview at some point in time for the podcast, because he is so pumped. We'll probably read just some of his comments over the past couple of months, because he's like very prolific in and verbose when it comes to words. And then afterwards we'll talk about knives, but that
okay,
probably
sounds great.
That probably isn't pertinent for what we're talking about.
Probably not great for the podcast, but maybe a different podcast. I bet there's a knife podcast out there.
Yeah, there's several. And if he and I
you
get
know
on
all
them,
about it.
Yeah,
Let's not start on that. But
I do. I don't need to be spending money there.
Well, what we were going to talk about today was the history of the Blair technique and who Dr. Blair was and what brought him into chiropractic in general.
Absolutely. So what's curious about Dr. Blair's experience with chiropractic is he didn't think that chiropractic was going to be able to help him. His family moved him all over the country because his asthma was just horrible from a very young age. And they ended up, I want to say Nebraska. Does that seem right? Or maybe it was North Texas.
I don't remember where.
They were all over the place. But he, and I'm going to have other Blair docs giving me grief about this because I should know this off the top of my head. I've taught it enough times. But he ended up having just, asthma so bad, even in a dry climate, that he was not projected to live much past 25 at the time.
And this was like the 1940s, you think, at this point?
Yeah, I want to say it was 1950 or so when 1950s when he gets up to Palmer. So, but yeah, it was one of those. He was
suffering in the 1940s.
Oh, absolutely. And then his girlfriend, who later became his wife, says, you're going to go see my doctor, Dr. Leon Halstead. Yeah, I can't forget that name. And sure enough, he gets his first Atlas adjustment, loves it. And Dr. Blair is already very analytical at this point in time. He is so enamored by this technique that he's like, I have to go learn how to do this. So he and Dottie Blair, I don't think they were married at the time. I'm not sure what the timeline is on their marriage, but both of them pack up and start driving up to Davenport, Iowa, where Dr. Halstead had learned the upper cervical techniques from Dr. Palmer. So he's on his way up there. Now, here's the funniest part of the story. He's doing great. His breathing is good. He's having no problems. And he visits a friend along the way. Now, back in the 40s and 50s, there were really hundreds of chiropractic schools, and they were all over the place. In fact, the early diplomas for chiropractic not only allowed you to practice it, but also allowed you to teach it, because they wanted this young profession to, proliferate very quickly, which was weird because there were
I can see
4
how
schools in Davenport.
There's benefits there, and then there's also things that probably were taught not right.
Very much so. Because as he's driving up, he's visiting a friend along the way who's also in chiropractic school. And they say, hey, we adjust Atlas as well. So why don't you just start classes here? So he starts classes on, at this point in time. And then about 3 or 4 weeks into the program, he goes out of adjustment, and his Atlas is flared up, or his asthma is flared up significantly. He goes down to their clinic and some of the lead docs in the office and says, hey, this is what we did last time. Can you adjust my Atlas? And they tried. And at the end of it, they said, son, you pack your stuff up and make your way to Davenport, because that's where you're going to get better. And that's where you're going to learn what you really want to do. So that's what he did.
For our listeners right now, Davenport means this is the birthplace of chiropractic. So this is where D.D. Palmer discovered chiropractic. And this is where his son BJ developed the profession. So at this point, BJ is still in charge of the school, and this is now this is Dr. Blair pilgrimage up to get the life-saving care he needs.
Absolutely, and here's the other thing that people need to realize. And I think we've made this joke before about the schools that you and I went to, because I went to Davenport, Iowa at Palmer College, and you went to Logan College in St. Louis. Both of these are on the Mississippi. And I've had arguments and there's silly arguments about which city has worse humidity in the middle of summer. It's really like one of those things where when you start comparing, they're both so bad that if St. Louis wins, it is literally by millimeters opposed to by miles.
It's gross. The one thing I will say that I don't regret about not being there is that we don't get as much snow.
Well, see, this is true. You don't have the snow, which goes to my point. There's more humidity in Davenport. Either way, humidity is horrible for an asthmatic. I mean, it is just not a good situation. So Dr. Blair is going through chiropractic school, probably living in one of the dorms that were on the 3rd floor of the one student building. That was an old building when he got there. It was at least 100 years old at that point in time.
Yikes.
So this is a great building. I mean, it's been renovated, and I'm not going to say it has a smell, but
I bet it did back then.
Old buildings have smells. So anyway,
particulates, there could be mold, all sorts of things that could affect somebody with asthma. Exactly.
He gets through the program. It's a 2-year program at the time. Graduates top of his class with honors, of course. And then he heads back to, I want to say he headed back to Lubbock, Texas almost immediately. And that's where he set up his small little practice. And within a year, he had to draw up basically a new facility, which was up until recently the Blair Chiropractic Clinic that Dr. Gordon Elder now has taken over and moved to a more modern location, because that building, as all buildings do,
in not a great part of town.
Was a great part of town. It was an old building and had problems. So
I'm still so thankful that Dr. Elder took over that.
Oh, absolutely.
He's a great chiropractor. So if anybody listening is in the Lubbock, Texas area, that is your doctor there. He's
absolutely. Amazing. And when we say Lubbock, Texas area, we're talking about the 300 miles because oftentimes that's how far people would go to see Dr. Blair. In fact, amongst patients that Dr. Blair had, because he saw all of the oil tycoons down there, they came to him, they flocked to him because of how how precise he was with his analysis at the time. And this was before he developed his technique that we now practice. But he was always looking for, how can I do this just a little bit better and a little bit better? Because he understands how bad his life was when, he had asthma, and the adjustment that got him better was truly life altering. And the argument about the old toggle recoil that you and I have both practiced at one point in time, that really got Dr. Blair thinking about it, was there are occasions where you will do the analysis 100% right, but because something is innately different and you couldn't see it on the x-rays the way that they were taken, you actually had to adjust them from the other side. And there wasn't a good explanation as to why at the time. And it wasn't, that's sometimes, you find this out along the way, but in this case, it was Dr. Blair's mother-in-law who needed to get adjusted from the other side. So he was definitely very much trying to figure out how he could make sure that he didn't have that situation twice.
Yeah. So I think what was incredible about Dr. Blair is that he didn't just say, it's good enough.
Right.
Nothing was good enough for this man. This man wanted perfection. He wanted to figure out systematically why things work the way they did and how to adjust somebody in the most precise way, which is just incredible. Well, all of us Blair chiropractors, we owe so much to Dr. Blair.
Absolutely.
But it's interesting that he figured this out through an interaction with his mother-in-law, though.
Right. Well, and it started.
You don't want to piss off your mother-in-law.
It started that path. I mean, he liked his mother-in-law apparently, but he ended up, just looking at things from a different lens, and this is where he eventually finds his articular views that we call protracto views. And quite honestly, I just, with the CBCT now and the cone beam CT, I just turn it and I'm like, there it is. And I can see how the listing sits differently. In fact, the patient that I haven't seen since 2018 that was in today, hers had changed. And I'm like, oh, there it is. It's clear as day. When I start really dialing in, and
so when we're talking about articular views, I'm going to turn this way here.
Yeah, perfect.
There we go. So right here, articular means the joint, right? So, and when we're looking at the joint on someone, we're actually looking at right down the line where the joint lines up. So if something lines up, we can see it. If it's not, it's doing that. And if it's not, it's doing that. So on this one, it's overlapping.
Yes.
And so when he's talking about articular joints or the articular surfaces, we're actually looking at how joints interact with each other and what makes them misalign.
Absolutely. And for those people who are just listening to this and don't have time to get to the video, I understand. One of the way to think about x-rays when we've traditionally taken them, there were a couple things going on, but as they would take a picture, you would just take a picture from the front and from the side to get as best an idea of what 3D is. Now, new technology now allows us to get a volumetric picture that gets effectively something out of the Iron Man movies that we've seen, where he's just doing all the modeling around his arm. But what we're able to do, what Dr. Blair figured out, is that we actually had to turn the angle so we could look straight down the joint, because almost none of the joints are square. As we look forward, very few joints are square going forward. As we look at the sides, very few joints are square to the sides. So you actually have to look at that joint in order to see the proper and the true misalignment. And that's what Dr. Blair had figured out, and then eventually developed an x-ray analysis, or not an x-ray analysis, but an adjusting technique that addresses those more exactly than the old toggle technique addressed, which is really neat, because once you understand that most bones are moving forward and backwards instead of left and right, then you have to reevaluate how you can adjust a person and how you get them back to health and healing. So,
yeah,
which is why we see such great results, because sometimes it's just a matter of putting the bone back into place in the right direction. And that's all it took to get somebody well.
Yeah, absolutely.
But getting back to Dr. Blair's life was extended for 3 times what they expected him to live because of upper cervical work, especially, the work that he eventually developed. And there are so many people, myself included. I talked about this last week, where my sinusitis goes away when I'm when I'm in adjustment, and it comes back sometimes with a vengeance when I'm out of adjustment. And I see so many people who have had asthma, allergies, respiratory issues in general get better once we get their head on straight.
Yeah, I don't know how many times I adjust someone, and as I'm like getting them off the table, they're like, "Ooh, I can breathe through my nose again," or or I've never been able to breathe through one side of my nose, and after they've rested, they can again.
Yeah,
and they call us magical and stuff, and I'm like, it's not magic. It's how the body was designed to work. It's designed to work correctly. We just needed to remove that interference.
And it's funny. I don't know how bad it is around St. Louis, but around here, I mean, we've got fields everywhere. It's just, surrounding everything. And it's been such a dry fall that as they're coming out of the fields, all this dust, all this particulate, everything is in the air, and people are being exposed to this. In fact, a couple of my Meniere's cases are like, "Doc, I'm not sure if I'm in or out. My sinuses feel bad." But I live out in the middle of a cornfield practically, or a wheat field, or whatever it is. And we put their heads back on straight, and it's not going to be an immediate thing in those cases. It might calm things down, but the other problem is the allergen is there. The thing is constantly there. Opposed to some people, it's like, oh, now I can deal with XYZ because the hyperreactivity is not present anymore.
Yes. And that gets into where we talk about like allergies, because allergies, obviously, when we're talking about allergies from, mold or from pollen, we all think about sneezing and coughing and that kind of stuff, and asthma, the reaction. But like allergies could also be things that you eat too.
This is true.
And so there can be people with allergies, this hyperreactivity that, their body's sensitive to it, but maybe because they're out of alignment, their body is so hypersensitive that's why they go full anaphylactic. So it's not that we as chiropractors fix allergies. That's not what we do.
Yeah.
But what we do is fix the reason their body could have some hyperreactivity. And that starts with the central nervous system. Yep.
And then, we move right from allergies into cold and flu season, where everyone's already having problems. And again, we'll talk about the immune study another time. Yeah.
So cold and flu season, that's one that really gets me, because I hate that we call it a season. Season is fall, season is winter.
Yes.
There's no cold and flu season. There is 3 things that we do wrong during cold and flu season. Number 1 is we don't get enough light. So Dr. Schurger and me, we are both above, I forget what parallel it is, where we're not going to get enough vitamin D no matter what we do.
Everything north of Atlanta.
So there's no possible way past September that you can get enough vitamin D from the sun.
Right.
So you have to supplement if you want to keep your vitamin D levels high.
Yep.
So I've got some in my purse too.
I've got some right there. In fact, I had a patient pick up a bottle.
Yeah. I'm glad I said it, because I need to take my dose for today. I didn't take it yet.
Right.
So, and I'm not going to go over dosing and stuff. You need to talk to your doctor about what you need to take personally. But, I take a lot in the winter. I take a lot. So number 1 is vitamin D levels just tank. Number 2 is we start really the holiday of Halloween is we start eating way too much sugar. It's sugar. Then you've got the holidays, you've got Thanksgiving, you've got Christmas, and it's just sugar overload. So people are just decimating themselves with sugar.
And it's nice if you have a little bit of sugar at the Christmas party. The problem is you have 17 Christmas parties between the first, right after Thanksgiving, right through Christmas. And then you have your family Christmas stuff, which might be your, dad's side of the family, and then mom's side of the family, and then the other grandparents. You might have, 3 or 4 Christmas parties right into New Year's,
Yep.
But we skipped Thanksgiving. we completely skipped Thanksgiving because, you can't have Thanksgiving without a wall covered in pies. You might have this itty bitty little turkey and side dishes, but you got to have walls and walls of pies. And they're gone.
We've got big turkeys in my house.
Yes. I know your 2 turkeys.
So the third thing is, just like you talked about, the 17 parties you talked about, we got stress too. Mm-hmm. So stress is known to decrease the immune response. Sugar is known to reduce the immune response. And our immune response is not great if we have low vitamin D levels. So it's the trifecta that becomes cold and flu season. Absolutely. Where really it's all self-induced.
Yeah.
So we can fix that, guys.
And they don't even have to come to see us to fix that.
No, they don't have to do that for us.
People can just simply say, all right, I'm not going to eat all the sugar. I don't need to do the candy tax on the kids. And I'm going to be really good. You pick your days when you're going to eat your sugars and say, all right, that's where that is. And quite honestly, dealing with stress between now and, we're recording this right before the time change. I don't know if this is the last time change. There's some talk back and forth that they're going to stop doing.
I hope so.
Time.
It's dumb.
And not only that, is it so hard for so many people. The most car accidents and heart attacks are right around the time change. Let's see. We fall back now. So as we fall back, I think the car accidents increase because
it's pitch black when people are driving home from work.
Well, exactly. And they're not paying, and they're not used to it. They're not paying attention. And in the spring, when you spring forward, when you lose that hour, it is directly out of the Princess Bride when he sucks minutes and hours of your life away.
Yeah.
I mean, they suck 1 hour of your life away and increase in heart attacks for the next 2 weeks. It's no joke. So,
and there's no reason for it anymore. This is just silly.
No, we have light. We have all these other things. We can go on and on about blue light for being stress and as the days get shorter and everything else. But it is simply, there are ways to solve it. Now, on that note, though, you know what my teachers tell me? My teachers tell me that when they start under care, they don't get all the bugs and problems kids have because they're under care. Even if they're not changing their diet, even they're not dealing with their stress, they are dealing with their stress because their head is on straight and their body's better able to deal with the stresses that they're being.
Yeah, because you can't, you can say no and decrease like parties you're going to, but you can't decrease like this amount of stress you have.
No.
Actually, I use this way to speak to patients about it is that if you think of like you've got a dam and water behind the dam, and the water during super stressful times is overflowing the dam and it's creating all of these symptoms. What chiropractic does is we can't decrease your water, but what we can do is increase the height of your dam. And if we increase the height of your dam, then you can deal with all of the stress. It doesn't reduce it. You just can handle it better.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's really what we want to do to get everybody working better so that they're more resilient. They're able to deal with their day-to-day lives. The kids are screaming and you're like, oh, they're kids. That's why they're screaming. And you can deal with them just that little bit longer in your day.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that covers most of what we wanted to talk about today.
I think it does too. So it was a good little podcast on how to stay healthy through the holidays, one thing, but also what an amazing person Dr. Blair was that came up with this technique that has changed the lives of, at this point, I would say about 1 million or millions of people at this point.
Absolutely. So I had a couple thoughts, and I'm just going to throw them out here before we wrap up so people can say, hey, but what about, I had a thought that we should talk about migraines, and we could probably go do a deep dive on migraines. Of course, we've been teasing about the immune study. Too long didn't read is go get your head on straight, and that'll help boost your immune system. We'll talk about the details of that at another time. There's one other. We'll figure it out when we get to it, but make sure everyone likes and subscribes and leaves a 5-star review. because that helps more people find this. In fact, that's probably, half the reason we're doing this is so more people can find either, not just myself and Dr. Bagley, but other upper cervical docs and Blair docs who can help people get out of the stress and pain that they've been suffering with, because they're like, how come other doctors don't know about this? And we don't know either.
You don't know what you don't know.
Correct.
Yeah.
Oh, before we wrap, I got to tell you about this one young lady that finally got adjusted. So she, and maybe I'll put her, we'll get a picture of her x-ray. Maybe she'll join us on a podcast at some point, but she was worried. She's like, I don't want anyone touching my neck. And
I don't want anyone touching my neck either. I want only particular people touching.
Exactly. And this, and I pulled up her picture. I pull out the radiologist report, and I'm like, here, let's just go over some of the weird stuff going on in your neck right off the bat. Her atlas should connect in the back and be a perfect ring.
It's like
her atlas was not.
Yep.
Now, there's also something called the dens or the odontoid.
Yep.
Hers, so your second bone in your neck. So your first bone neck is atlas. The second bone in your neck is axis. Your head and your atlas pivot around your axis around a point that is called, or a little finger that comes up through the atlas that is called the dens or the odontoid. Hers floats above.
Ooh.
Yeah. So she's got these two things going on. Plus, a year ago, she was in a car accident that she's still having pain and suffering from.
Oh.
Yeah. And I'm basically telling her, look, because her friend who's been under care for about a month and a half now is saying, he's gentle. He'll be really easy with you. It's nothing to worry about.
Yeah.
But I'm like, first off, we're going to crank the amount of force we're going to use is going to be less than I would normally use on any other individual. And second, never, I love chiropractic and I think chiropractors do great work, but in the case of her neck,
never
something so very precise that anyone else might actually cause bigger problems and actually cause her to have a significant problem that would require surgery. And she would require a lot of surgery if this became completely unstable. So we did the adjustment and she gets up and she's like, I feel like it's flushing down the back of my neck. And after she got up, after I had her rest for 30 minutes, I got her up and she's like, that doesn't hurt anymore. I'm like, I know. And she's like, I was nervous. And I wasn't sure about this, which is why it's been a month since she's been in from when we took the pictures initially, that she's like, all right, we're going to do this. We're going to do this. They've been like, what are we going to do? There's some money involved. No, it's going to get them better. So
that's awesome. I love it.
It really is. I love cases like this. I'm excited. I was talking with Chris Thornburg about your cone beam and how we're scheduling stuff because he's got to fix mine or upgrade mine rather for something else around the same time he's coming up to do yours. And I'm just excited for you to start seeing some of these. So you're like, oh, we are definitely going to do things a little bit differently for you.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. I also already have a list of patients I want to get cone beam CTs on.
You just start down the list. It's like, all right, everyone is coming in and we're going to just do everybody this week. In fact, you're going to have your cone beam set up right before Thanksgiving and you're going to be like, do I want to go get turkey or do I want to take another 7 or 8 pictures before lunch?
Yep. I'm excited. It's going to be awesome.
Me too.
Well, Doc, it was good talking to you. It was a great podcast. And
absolutely.
Remember, everybody, like, subscribe, and find us online. And if you have questions, write some questions in the comments. We'll be looking at them.
Absolutely. Watch out for the blonde and the bald on YouTube. I think we've got that all set up now. So that'll be there as well as on all the podcast apps. So
fantastic.
All right. We will talk later.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
That's all for today's episode of The Blonde and the Bald. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. If you enjoyed today's show with Drs. Bagley and Schurger, remember, don't give up and just live with the pain. Come back next week and get more answers and solutions. Visit our websites at KeystoneChiroSPI.com and PrecisionChiropracticSTL.com for more info, and catch all the episodes of The Blonde and the Bald.